They laid off my son the same morning he posted a photo mocking my diploma-free resume. Name's Rufus Marrow. 58, never went to college, but I remember the smell of ink from every paycheck I signed. Still got the old leather ledger that tracked his trust fund. And a question that's been itching at me: ever had someone underestimate you just before learning who really signs the checks? The fork paused halfway to my mouth. Callan was laughing, eyes sparkling, hand grazing Marcy's arm as he tossed off the line like it was some inside joke. My dad's kind of old school poor. Still writes checks and uses that weird ledger thing. Marcy let out a polite laugh, eyes darting to me. Miriam chuckled too, the way you do when trying to keep dinner light. I didn't. The chicken piccata on my plate suddenly tasted metallic. I set the fork down and reached for my water glass instead. The rim felt cold, but it wasn't enough to cool the heat rising under my collar. There was a low whistle in my ears, rage, shame, grief, I couldn't tell. I'll get some air, I said quietly. No one stopped me. Why would they? Out on the porch, the air was thick with the scent of jasmine and late autumn humidity. Charleston always had that slow, sticky warmth in October, like the weather was reluctant to let go of summer. I leaned against the railing, watching the neighbor's cat slink across the fence line. Crickets chirped in steady rhythm, each one a metronome tapping into a memory I didn't ask for. Old school poor. It wasn't the insult, it was the casualness of it. The comfort with which he could frame me like a relic. And in front of Marcy, no less. I should have been proud his graduation dinner, a job already lined up in Atlanta, a girlfriend with manners and ambition. But pride didn't live here tonight, not after that. Later, when the house had gone quiet, I padded into my office barefoot. The carpet was worn, soft underfoot, in the way things become after years of use. I flicked on the banker's lamp, its green glass casting a muted glow across the room. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out the ledger. Brown leather frayed along the edges. I ran a thumb down the spine before flipping it open. The pages smelled faintly of ink and something musty, like the backs of libraries. Each line, each careful entry, told a story. I'd started it the week after Callan was born in 1998, though this particular volume began in 2017, the year I moved the trust into a new custodial account. Deposits from bonds, gifts from my side of the family. Interest from that brief tech stock high. I'd always been meticulous. When you come from nothing, you don't treat money as an afterthought. I flipped slowly. Page after page, school tuition payments, minor withdrawals for housing a summer trip to Spain that Miriam insisted would build independence. Fine. Then a line item caught my eye. Taste Society Annual, $200, October 3rd, 2022. My stomach turned. Taste Society. That wasn't in any of the budget requests Callan had submitted. Hell, I didn't even know what it was. Some wine club, a networking group with artisanal cheese. I double-checked. My signature wasn't there. No approval, no discussion. I sat back. That ledger had rules, not just financial ones. Rules about trust, literal and metaphorical. If he dipped into that fund for vanity, what else was hidden? I thought back to that dinner. His laugh, the confidence, Marcy's amused glance, Miriam's smile thin and fixed. The past clawed its way up Callan at 7, holding his first savings bond and asking, "Is this what rich feels like?" My own father's voice reminding me. Money ain't what makes a man, but it sure shows you who he is. I closed the ledger gently, like sealing a wound that hadn't bled out yet. Back on the porch, I sat in the same spot as before. A glass of scotch in one hand, the leather book in the other. The moon hung low, casting silver across the floorboards. I whispered, barely audible to myself. All right then, let's get to work. I brewed the coffee stronger than usual. The house was still save for the low hum of the old printer that never quite shut up even when idle. Its little light blinked, reminding me of those toys that drained batteries for no reason. The coffee pot clicked. The scent of bitterness bloomed across the kitchen like an old truth you didn't want to remember. By 6:45 a.m., I had spread the last 4 years' worth of statements across my office floor. Old school poor, huh? Let's see how old school matches against digital timestamps and ACH withdrawals. I opened the laptop Miriam had given me for my birthday last year, So you can finally retire the beige brick, she joked. She didn't know I still used the brick for the real work. This one was for appearances, Zoom calls with the Rotary Club, and checking baseball scores. Chrome loaded slowly. I sipped the coffee, lukewarm already. 2 tabs, the Trust's account portal, and my spreadsheet of logged expenses. I cross-checked the last 30 entries. Most looked normal: rent, groceries, a few restaurant charges, even a medical copay. But then came the anomalies. Lace Lab Elite, $1,050. STKR, crypto exchange transfer, $4,000. I blinked, hovered the cursor, clicked more details, sneakers, crypto, no explanation in the ledger, no matching memo from Callan, no authorization from me. I highlighted both in yellow. The printer sputtered, drawing my eye to the stack of printed statements I'd queued the night before. I knelt down and picked them up April through October. My old fingers weren't as quick as they used to be, but the muscle memory was still there. Pinch, flip, scan. I underlined 3 more charges, all post-June. I heard the stairs creak. Miriam appeared in the doorway wearing her soft lavender robe, one hand gripping the banister, the other holding a glass of water. "You're up early," I nodded without looking up. "Just auditing." She stepped into the room slowly, her eyes falling to the floor, the papers, the laptop. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "You're really going through all that again?" I glanced at her. "Something doesn't feel right." "It's just money, Rufus," she said gently, as if I were a man who needed soft edges around hard things. "Callan's been under pressure adjusting to adult life. Maybe he made a few mistakes." "Crypto mistakes." She exhaled through her nose. "Let it go," I stared at her. That phrase, "let it go," it carried more weight than it should have. She'd said it once when Callan was caught using my credit card in college. She said it when he'd crashed the Camry and blamed the brakes. Now again. I turned back to the screen. "Did you know about these transfers?" "I don't monitor his bank activity, Rufus." "But you talked to him last week. For 30 minutes. What was that about?" Miriam's jaw stiffened. "You're spiraling." I stood slowly, my spine cracked the way it always did when I moved too fast in the morning. I walked to the window and looked out. The neighborhood was still in shadows. Morning hadn't cracked open yet. "I'm not spiraling. I'm just paying attention." She left the room without another word. I returned to the desk, pulling up the secure message portal for the Trust Bank. The login was saved 2-factor authenticated, and then a drop-down to request additional activity logs. Under Reason for Request, I typed periodic audit for reconciliation. Please include IP addresses of all logins from June-October 2022. I clicked Submit. Next, I opened a new email, typed in Callan's address. The autofill popped up fast, still starred from years of college scheduling emails and family trip plans. Subject: quick, look over some charges. Body: hey bud. Hope the new apartment's coming together. I'm doing a routine look-through of the Trust. Something I do every few years, just to stay on top of things. Saw a couple charges I didn't recognize, nothing major, probably just mislabeled. Mind sending over your expense log for June to now? Just helps me stay clean with the tax guy. Thanks, Dad. I read it 3 times. Smiled at the politeness, the restraint, the manila envelope tone I'd perfected over the years. Then I hit send. Just as I closed the laptop, Miriam walked past the office again. She didn't stop, but I caught her words floating back like incense. "Don't burn the bridge over a few sneakers." I stared at the screen. The ledger sat closed beside me, untouched since last night, but somehow heavier than before. I hadn't seen Thurston Hale in nearly 8 years, but his number was still in my Rolodex. The actual kind, not the one in a phone. It was wedged between heating service, Alton, and handyman retired vet Tony. The ink had faded, the card curled at the corners, but the name was still there, still legible, like something waiting to be useful again. I called at 7:42 a.m. He picked up on the second ring. No pleasantries, just a gravelly Easton's. 10 a.m., booth by the window. He hadn't changed. The air that morning was brittle, the kind of November in Charleston where the cold sneaks in under your collarbone, not because it's fierce, but because you're never quite ready for it. The diner sat off Highway 17, crouched low behind a strip of dying shrubs and a flickering open sign that hadn't been replaced since the Obama years. Inside, the vinyl booths were cracked in the same way I remembered red cushions with exposed yellowing foam. The same photos on the walls, Polaroids of Little League teams, prom couples, and Elvis impersonators. Thurston was already there. He wore the same dark corduroy jacket I remembered from the conference in '09, frayed at the elbows. A man who had made his peace with appearances. His fingers tapped the rim of a ceramic mug, sending a rhythmic thud into the formica. I slid in across from him. He didn't smile, but his eyes lifted. "You look like you haven't slept. Not since Saturday." He nodded as if confirming something. The waitress came by with a pot of coffee. She was new, or at least new to me, mid-30s. Maybe curly hair, warm hands when she refilled my mug. Sugar's in the tray. Syrup's sticky, don't touch it. I glanced at the corner of the table where a crusted ring of syrup had formed its own kind of fossil. I reached for a napkin but thought better of it. So Thurston said, "Which bridge is burning?" I smiled. "Did I say something was burning? You wouldn't be here if everything was still standing." He leaned back. The vinyl gave a soft groan. Behind him, a framed photo showed a kid in a catcher's mask, holding up a foul ball. Thurston turned his mug, aligning the handle to the left. "It's Callan. Ah, that's all you have to say." He took a slow sip. "Tell me." I did. I told him about the dinner, the ledger, the crypto transfers. Miriam's quiet defense and Callan's casual indifference. He listened without blinking. Then with a voice lower than before, he said, "My daughter took out her IRA last year. Didn't ask. Said she needed a down payment, didn't care about the penalty. Did you say anything I offered to match it?" She declined. Said she wanted to do it her way. Then she sent me an invoice for the closing costs. I raised an eyebrow. "Did you pay it?" He smiled with only the left side of his mouth. I sent her a note. Just one line. "Sometimes giving is lazy parenting." I sat back. The coffee had grown cold again, but the ceramic was still warm. It held on to heat the way some memories do, not vibrant but persistent. "That ledger," I said, "the one I kept. It used to feel like a record of love. Now it feels like evidence." He looked at me with something softer than sympathy, maybe recognition. "Legacy's tricky," he said. "You think it's about money. It's not. It's about meaning. And most people don't want the meaning. They just want the cash." A silence passed between us. The smell of burnt bacon wafted from the kitchen. It tugged at a corner of my mind, the memory of Callan at age 7 standing beside me in the kitchen, watching me scrape blackened strips off a skillet. "Will I ever be rich?" he'd asked. "You already are," I'd said, but he hadn't understood. Maybe he still didn't. I stared at the syrup ring again. Someone had tried to clean it once, faint streaks around the edges, but gave up halfway through. The stain remained half effort and all. "Would you freeze the trust?" I asked. Thurston didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached across the table and placed his hand gently over mine. It was cool, dry, and heavier than I remembered. "No," he said. I'd remind her who built it. The waitress returned with the check handwritten. There was an ink smudge across the total. I slid a $20 into the tray and pushed the receipt aside. "I think it's time," I said. Thurston nodded but didn't ask for details. We stood slowly, my back resisted with a quiet ache. Outside, the wind had picked up, scattering the last of the golden leaves across the parking lot. I zipped my jacket, eyes on the horizon. Some bridges burn loud, others just fade. I woke at 3:12 a.m. The room was dark but not quiet. There's a kind of static that fills a house when everyone else is asleep. The screen of my laptop still glowed faintly across the room, the blinking cursor frozen atop an unsent email. "Dear Callan," it began. It didn't go much further. I rubbed my temples, crossed the hall, and clicked the door shut behind me. My study was colder at night, as if the air vents gave up after midnight. I wrapped a throw around my shoulders and sat down. The light of the desk lamp made the coffee ring from earlier look like a bullseye. Click. I opened the folder titled Final, Q4 Audit. For the past 4 nights, I'd been piecing it together. This time, no cross-checks with old notes or hand-drawn memos. I had downloaded all transaction data from the trust 6 years' worth, and finally sorted them into clean categories. At 3:23 a.m., I clicked open the 2022 Outliers tab. The numbers stared back harsh and sterile. Gucci, $1, $325 Coinbase transfer, $2,700 Nightjar Social Club, $860 Kith. Com, $460. Catch, L, $400, no notes. No context. Just a rhythm of selfishness masquerading as living. I printed the sheet. The printer wheezed like an old smoker, but did its job. The paper curled slightly as it landed in the tray. Charleston humidity doesn't forgive even in winter. I pulled out the leather ledger from the drawer. The spine had given way. A little slit right where the stitches used to hold. It used to sit flat. Now it sagged like a tired animal. I turned to the last page. No more space. I'd been writing by hand since 2017. Every birthday check, every book fund, every dental copay. It was all there, but now it was too full. The cracks in the binding mirrored the cracks elsewhere. Maybe that was the point. My phone buzzed Callan. I stared for a second too long before answering. Hey, Dad. He didn't call me Dad much anymore. It had the flavor of guilt. It's late, I said evenly. I saw your email about the charges. I'm just looking for clarity. He sighed. Look, some of that stuff was time-sensitive. Crypto's volatile. And Nightjar Social Club. A pause. That was a networking dinner. I didn't laugh. Your expense log, I've been meaning to send it. Things got away from me. All right, I'll get it to you soon, okay? I didn't respond. The silence grew roots between us. Night, Dad. He hung up. I set the phone down gently like a weight I wasn't ready to bear. Then I opened a new tab. Trust account management, administrative controls, freeze instructions. A prompt asked for confirmation, freeze trust disbursements. Effective immediately, I hovered the mouse. Then I moved instead to schedule send. Typed a subject line, temporary fund suspension, audit underway. Attached the printout and my audit notes. Set delivery for December 5th, 9:00 a.m. just before I clicked. Confirm, I whispered aloud. This isn't punishment, it's teaching. A thin shiver went up my back, not from cold but finality. The kind of finality you feel when you pull the last page from a photo album or leave a voicemail you know you'll never unsend. I watched as the screen changed scheduled. December 5, 9:00 a.m. Then I reached for the ledger one more time. I ran my fingers across its spine, now visibly frayed. The paper edges softened by years of touch. I placed it beside the printer and turned off the lamp. In the dark, the room looked smaller, like it had collapsed into itself under the weight of what I'd just done. And yet I slept better that night than I had in weeks. Why would the ATM reject me? Callan's voice cracked like glass on pavement, loud and unfiltered through my phone speaker. I'd barely stepped onto the porch bathrobe, brushing my ankles, coffee mug still steaming. The air smelled of damp pine and someone down the street revving a leaf blower. Just another Monday in Charleston, the kind with brittle blue skies and long shadows by 8 a.m. I didn't answer right away. I stared at the chipped edge of the porch railing, rubbed my thumb across the flaking paint. The trust freeze had executed at 9:00 a.m. sharp. Callan must have tried his card the moment he walked out of his condo. Dad, are you there? My Uber declined. I couldn't even pay for my matcha. What the hell is going on? I lifted the phone to my ear and said calmly, It's been administratively paused. Paused. He scoffed like the word was a personal insult. What are you talking about? There's a fiduciary clause, I said. In the original documents, you might not remember it. It allows for a temporary hold in case of suspicious activity or concern. There was silence on the other end. Then a quick burst of sound, something slammed, maybe a drawer. You've got to be kidding me. I took a sip of my coffee. It had cooled faster than usual, probably the wind. My hand wrapped around the mug tightly, more for the warmth than anything. The ceramic felt solid, dependable. I warned you in the email, I said. This isn't a punishment, Callan. It's a review. He laughed bitterly. A review? Like I'm some temp intern at your office. What are you even talking about? The money's mine. No, I said, quiet but firm. It's held in trust. That's the point of a trust. It's not a gift. It's a responsibility. More silence. Then he switched tactics. You think I'm irresponsible because I spent a little on sneakers, on networking dinners. I think you never asked, I said. And I think somewhere along the way you stopped seeing the difference between use and entitlement. I heard his breath hitch, whether from anger or disbelief, I couldn't tell. Jesus, he muttered. You're jealous. That caught me off guard. Jealous, yeah. Of me. Of the life I get to live. Of the fact that I don't have to grind myself into the floor like you did. Admit it. You needed me to validate your worth, didn't you? I closed my eyes, letting his words hang. He thought this was about validation. He didn't understand at all. No, son, I said quietly. I needed you to understand it. The screen door creaked behind me. Miriam stood there in her robe, her face unreadable. She'd heard everything or close to it. She didn't say a word, just stood still, hands curled around her own coffee mug, the same blue-glazed one she'd used since 2004. Callan was still on the line. I could hear his breathing shallow, quick, like a boxer mid-fight. I've never asked you for anything, he said, his voice low now. You offered. You always offered. And I will again, I replied. But not like this. He didn't respond. Just a sharp exhale, then the call dropped. I didn't lower the phone immediately. I kept it to my ear as if he might come back, say something else. He didn't. Miriam walked past me, not meeting my eyes. She sat on the far end of the porch, pulled her knees up under the robe, and stared out at the cul-de-sac. The leaf blower had stopped. A dog barked once distantly. We sat in silence for a while. Then she said, He's scared. I know, and angry, I know. She looked at me then. Are you? I took a long sip, then another. My hand trembled slightly, but not from cold. No, I said, just tired. The ledger was inside, still on the study desk, still cracked at the spine. I hadn't touched it that morning, but I could feel its weight anyway. You'll talk to him again, she asked. Of course. She nodded. Don't wait too long. A breeze kicked up, tugging at the loose edges of the porch awning. I leaned back in the chair, set the mug on the armrest, and folded my hands. I didn't know when Callan would call back or if. But for the first time in weeks, I wasn't chasing the moment. I was letting it settle. Inside the house, the old printer hummed to life. A scheduled report, probably, or the copy of the letter I'd sent the trust firm. I let it go, let the sound fade into the distance. By the time the sun fully cleared the treetops, my coffee had gone cold. But the cup stayed warm in my hand, the ceramic still holding heat. He didn't come home for Christmas. The stocking with Callan's name hung above the fireplace until midday on the 26th, its soft flannel sagging as if it too had realized its owner wouldn't be arriving. Miriam took it down without a word. She folded it once, then again, and placed it at the back of the linen drawer, where old wrapping paper and forgotten ornaments went to sleep. Neither of us spoke about it. Outside, Charleston's December wrapped the world in brittle sun and windswept leaves, but inside the house felt overly quiet, like it was waiting for something that wouldn't come. I spent most of that week in my study. The trust fund hadn't seen a single transaction since the freeze, no inquiries, no legal requests, not even a passive-aggressive email. It was a clean, uncomfortable silence, like being in a room after an argument where no one wants to speak first. On the desk sat the old leather ledger, its spine bent open, and one page near the middle was torn down the side. I didn't remember it being like that. I hadn't handled it roughly. The tear looked accidental, but fresh. A jagged wound across clean columns of ink. February 2019. Dorm deposit $1,200. Signed by R.M. I traced the line with a fingertip. Above the ledger stood a photo frame tilted back slightly against a stack of tax folders. Callan was 6 in the photo, holding a ceramic piggy bank painted like a race car. His grin was missing a front tooth. My handwriting was visible in the background on a chalkboard sign. First $50 saved, I sat back in my chair and stared at it. Miriam came in with a plate of sliced apples and cheese. She didn't say much at first, just set the plate down and perched on the edge of the desk. I saw him on Claire's Instagram, she said, brushing something from her sleeve. New Year's Eve. They were on a rooftop somewhere. Champagne hats, fireworks. I didn't look up. He's allowed joy. She nodded, then added, he looked thinner. That landed somewhere I didn't expect. I pictured him brushing off appetizers at cocktail parties, covering credit shortfalls with charm. The kind of diet pride never names out loud. Later that night, I found myself sitting in the living room alone, the TV on mute, the ceiling fan whirring overhead in lazy circles. My laptop screen glowed with the trust portal, still untouched. I clicked through old email drafts, then paused on one I'd started, but never sent. Subject line, ready when you are. The body was a single sentence, let's talk when you're ready. I'm still here. I deleted it. Then a few minutes later, I went into the trash folder and clicked restore. Upstairs, Miriam had gone to bed early. I sat in the dark scrolling social media, not for spite, but for proof of life. I watched a video of Callan clinking glasses with friends I didn't recognize, heard his laughter in the background. It was real and easy and somewhere far away from this study, this house, this silence. The next morning, the floorboards creaked under my feet as I made coffee. Outside, the street was slick from a light overnight rain. Cardinals darted between leafless branches. I sat by the window, watched the steam rise from my mug, and tried not to imagine him waking up hungover in someone else's guest room. Later that day, I called Thurston Hale. He picked up on the third ring. Rufus, he said warmly, it's been a minute. I was hoping you'd be around. I'm always around, he said. Easton still serves terrible hash browns. You driving? Yeah, I said, glancing at the clock. I need to get out for a bit. Miriam caught me in the hallway before I left, drying her hands on a dish towel. You going to see Thurston? I nodded. She studied me for a long moment, then reached up to adjust the collar of my coat. Her hands lingered. You didn't lose the money, she said softly. But did you lose him? I didn't have an answer. She didn't wait for one. As I stepped outside, I felt the torn page in the inside pocket of my coat. I'd slipped it there without thinking, page 47 of the ledger, the one with the dorm deposit and a half-torn signature. I didn't know why I'd taken it. Maybe to show Thurston, maybe to remind myself. The sky was pale and empty. I stood on the porch for a moment, hand on the railing, then made my way down the steps to the car. The drive to Easton's diner was 40 minutes. I didn't turn on the radio. You froze the money, not the love. Thurston said it just as the waitress set down our plates, 2 stacks of buttermilk pancakes steaming in the slant of winter sunlight. He took the syrup bottle with his left hand. Old football injury left him stiff on the right, and poured with a practiced grace that bordered on reverence. The syrup pooled slowly, glistening amber over golden batter, and for a moment we both just watched it soak in. Easton's diner hadn't changed since the last time we met. The same squeaky vinyl booths, the wall of faded black and white photos, a laminated menu whose corners curled like leaves in winter. But this morning it felt warmer somehow. The light was gentler, or maybe it was me who had softened. I keep thinking I went too far, I said finally. Thurston chewed, then dabbed his mouth. And you might have, but don't confuse clarity with cruelty. I nodded, stirring my coffee more than drinking it. I told you about Nora, didn't I? He asked. Bits and pieces. He leaned back, eyes drifting out the window. She left for California at 23. Got into tech, made her own money. One day she cashed out a retirement account I'd set up, bought a convertible, sent me a thank you text, said she was done being controlled by old men's paperwork. He chuckled without malice. We didn't speak for 3 years, and now I asked. She called me on a Thursday, he said. Asked if I still had that ugly garden gnome she painted in 3rd grade. Said she missed the way the porch creaked when you stepped just right. I smiled. You think Callan will do that? He shrugged. Not exactly, but kids return in stranger ways than we imagine. Sometimes they don't say sorry. Sometimes they just show up with groceries. There was something comforting in that. Not dramatic redemption, not apology with fanfare, just presence. A quiet, clumsy return. Thurston reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small square envelope. He slid it across the table. Found this at a leather shop in Asheville. It's a repair strip. Adhesive backed. Thought of that ledger you still carry like scripture. I opened the envelope. Inside was a narrow strip of rich brown leather, warm to the touch, its edges burnished. Meant to bind, not replace. Thanks, I said quietly. You know, he added, sometimes we patch things not because they'll be perfect again, but because they still matter. I didn't finish my pancakes. The syrup had gone cold and the butter congealed. But I folded the adhesive strip carefully, returned it to its envelope, and tucked it into my coat pocket like something sacred. That night back in my study, I turned off the overhead light and sat with only the desk lamp on. I laid the ledger down gently as if it were sleeping. The spine had frayed in places, the threads barely holding. The torn page was still nestled between February and March, silent witness to the weight of years. I peeled the backing off the repair strip, slowly aligned it along the spine, and pressed it down with both hands. The leather warmed beneath my palms. The seam, though visible, looked proud. Not perfect, but dignified. Then I pulled a note card from the drawer, the thick kind, cream-colored with faint lines. I began writing, my hand slower than it used to be, but steady. Callan, I hope the new year feels better than the last. I know what I did hurt. I know it probably felt like a betrayal, but it wasn't anger. It was love that didn't know where to go. I'll be here when you're ready. Dad. I didn't reread it. I folded the card in half, slipped it into a plain white envelope, and wrote his name in block letters. No address, just Callan Marrow. I sealed it with a damp sponge, not saliva. Something about the ritual felt formal, almost sacred. The next morning, I placed the envelope in the mailbox at the end of the drive. The air was crisp again, the kind that makes your breath visible and your thoughts feel sharper. I stood there for a moment, holding the red flag between thumb and forefinger. Then I let it drop. It clicked into place with a soft finality, and for the first time in weeks, maybe months, I exhaled without bracing first. The knock came at 7:02 a.m., not frantic, not timid, just deliberate. I had just poured my first cup of coffee, the steam curling gently toward the window pane, where condensation glistened in soft halos. Charleston's spring air had that jasmine sweetness again, mixed with the earthy scent of soil, still damp from last night's rain. The porch creaked as I stepped onto it, cup in hand, slippers soft against the worn wood. He stood there, hoodie pulled over slightly unkempt hair, hands in the front pocket, sneakers scuffed. That hoodie dark gray stitched with the emblem of the Yellowstone Lodge we stayed at in 2011. He had been 10, still small enough to climb on my back during long hikes. The sleeves barely fit him now, wrists peeking through as if time had outrun the fabric. "Hi," Callan said, voice dry from early morning air. "Hi," I replied quietly. Miriam must have heard the creak because she appeared behind the doorframe, her eyes instantly welling. She didn't speak, just nodded once and stepped back inside. It wasn't distance, it was grace. We didn't hug, not then. We stood for a beat. Two men, one bloodline apart, measuring silence not with resentment, but with what had settled in its place. "I thought about calling first," he said, "but I figured you might not pick up." "I might not have," I admitted. He chuckled. "Yeah." We took a slow walk through the yard past the crepe myrtles I'd pruned back just last week. Spring's earliest leaves trembled in the light breeze. "I got a job," Callan said. "Real job. HR, onboarding, benefits and all." He looked down at the gravel. "It's not glamorous, but I like it." "I'm glad," I said, meaning it. "I've been thinking," he continued. "I'd like to earn the rest, not just get handed it." I stopped walking and turned to him. "Then I'll teach you the books." His head snapped up, surprise softening into a grin that tried to hide itself. "I'm serious," I added. "We'll open the ledger, line by line. You'll learn not just where it came from, but how it moves." "That sounds intense." "It is," I said, "but so's life." We returned to the porch. I poured him coffee. He took it black, which surprised me. We sat for a while, letting the silence hum like a tune we both used to know. That afternoon, we moved to the study. The ledger, now mended at the spine, rested beside a new book I'd ordered a few weeks back, Teaching Finance to Teens. Its cover was all blues and yellows, the kind of cheery palette Callan used to scoff at. "I've been thinking," I said. "The trust, it's not just yours anymore, or mine." He raised an eyebrow. "We'll set aside a portion, something small at first, but it'll fund free workshops. Budgeting credit literacy, small investments, for teens or families, people who never got taught what you and I are finally learning. He blinked. You sure I think it's what legacy should look like? We sketched it out over 2 hours, yellow legal pad pages slowly filling with names, dollar ranges, timelines. He asked good questions, listened, offered ideas. At one point, he pointed at a scribble I made and laughed. Dad, your handwriting's a war crime. I grinned. You inherited it. He laughed harder this time, the kind that loosened something inside both of us. It wasn't forced. It wasn't nostalgic. It was present. Later that week, we taped a flyer to the corkboard in the lobby of the church where Miriam volunteered on Thursdays. Free workshop, budgeting with your dad, first session, Saturday 3 p.m., snacks provided, no judgment. We smoothed the tape down carefully, each pressing a corner. A few early birds chirped outside as light streamed through the stained glass. Somewhere in the background, someone vacuumed the sanctuary carpet. Life continued quietly while we began again. That evening, Callan shelved the ledger back in the study, right beside the finance guide. He didn't say anything, but before closing the cabinet, he paused just a second longer than needed. Sometimes reconciliation doesn't look like apologies. It looks like participation. And as he turned off the light and headed toward the kitchen, I found myself exhaling again, steady, full, and without fear. This morning, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, the scent of jasmine in the air, and that old leather ledger now patched and shelved resting quietly behind me. No more torn pages, no more silent blame. I used to think I was teaching my son about money. Turns out I was learning how to love him without strings or silence. Sometimes bridges have to break, so we can decide which ones are worth rebuilding. And with enough time, even a worn ledger can open to a brand new page. What about you? Has there ever been a relationship in your life that healed in an unexpected way? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. And if any part of this tale felt familiar, maybe you're ready to write your next chapter too.